Reality Transurfing, Book 3, Forward to the Past, by Vadim Zeland. Chapter 3, Coordination. Section, Coordination of Intention. Coordination of Intention. Man feels himself to be in the power of circumstances. He believes that little depends on him. Sometimes he gets lucky, and for a while he is flying on the wave of fortune. At times he even thinks that fortune is in his hands. He needs to act determinedly, and he starts fighting vigorously. But despite all his efforts, victory is often persistently followed by defeat. It is as if people are walking down a road that is lined with high hills and deep pits. Determinate and self-confident people are constantly turning from the even road, and for some reason they start to climb the hills. There, on the hills, shining temptingly, are prizes, which have been left by the pendulums. Sometimes, as a result of incredible effort, somebody manages to get the prize, but more often than not, people fail. Anyway, once on a hill, man falls down head over heels, knocked off his feet by the wind of balancing forces. And once again, man feels helpless, and again it seems to him that little depends on him. Another type of people, the negativists, believe that nothing is up to them, and they prefer to feebly wallow in the pits of the worst fears. Worst fears are realized instantly. Negativists do not simply suffer from being helpless, they immaturely give their fate away into strangers' hands, saying, God's will be done. They are not moving with the flow of variations, but they are not resisting it either. They are just wallowing, expressing dissatisfaction and poisoning the energy atmosphere around them. The only thing they are good at is at realizing their own worst fears. That is why negativists find pleasure in fearing the worst. That way they are at least right about something. The only thing they are perfect at doing is to look for and find support for their negative attitude. People like that find some kind of sadomasochistic pleasure in the negative. They are able to turn the smallest thing into a tragedy. Their motto, life is miserable and every day it gets worse, is their choice. And the negativists look for and find the evidence in everything to prove it. That is just the sufferers they are, and they are constantly being blamed and punished. That is the bitter lot of these martyrs. They are literally swimming in the negative and find satisfaction in that. And you know why? It is because the negative is the only thing that the world agrees with them on and goes to meet them with. It is because the negative is the only thing that the world agrees with them on and goes to meet them with. They find support and confidence that their worst fears are going to come true. Occasionally, a negativist accidentally finds himself on a wave of fortune. He's pleased and enjoying himself for a while, but that doesn't last, because soon he starts turning his head and looking around, searching for the darkness he is so used to. Sure, after all, everything that is good quickly comes to an end, because success is not normal, it is unnatural. The negativist starts looking strenuously for a way to catch on to the darkness, in order to once again find himself in the usual ditch where everything is bad, but at least predictable. He starts thinking, where could he apply his dissatisfaction? He starts listening carefully to bad news, complaining, blaming, and demanding. And if there is no opportunity to demand, then he crawls into the role of a victim that everyone has to comfort and calm down. To wean the negativist away from the habit of finding pleasure in self-torture is very hard. It is a difficult case. The trouble is that he is not only making his life miserable, by transforming the layer of his world, the negativist is dragging those close to him whose layers collide with his into that pitiful little hell of his. But look at the paradox. Despite the fact that the negativist appears to be helpless, he possesses great power, and he uses his power to the maximum. His power lies in the firm conviction that life is awful and every day it gets worse. This firm conviction is nothing other than the determination to have. That is why the choice of the negativist is successfully realized. The negativist is really making a choice, and the world is actually meeting him halfway. It turns out that a man is not helpless after all, and that a lot of things are up to him. It turns out that a man is not helpless after all, and that a lot of things are up to him. The realization of a negativist's worst fears confirms the fact that everyone is capable of affecting the course of events. Everyone is capable of determining a scenario not only in a dream, but also in reality. Life is wonderful, and it gets better every day. However, having picked up this motto, a man is embarking on a journey in the clouds. Should he feel doubt even for a second and look under his feet with fear, as he will instantly fall through the clouds and down. That is why negative mood is so persistent, because from his very birth, man got used to seeing evidence of the hostile attitude of the world towards him. Right after he is born, aggressive influence of great power comes over the little person. He was lying there by himself in the womb. It was cozy, warm, and peaceful. But then this poor little creature is grabbed and rudely pushed out of this comfort. He hears his mother screaming, and perhaps the little person realizes that he is causing her suffering, and thus the foundation for guilt is laid. The bright light hits his eyes. You want to squeeze your eyes together and not see anything. The moist warmth turns into a harsh, dry cold. You want to curl up into a ball and seal yourself off from this awfulness, but here, right off the bat, they cut through the umbilical cord, thus rudely breaking the only link with your source of life. This little person is already in death shock. He is suffocating. He does not yet know how he has to breathe. They thump on his back, delivering lifelong trauma. With the sharpness of a razor, air pierces his lungs. It is painful to breathe, but there is no other way. The conditions that have been set are harsh. Either you fight for your life or you die. The innocent and pure mind learns the first lesson. The innocent and pure mind learns the first lesson. The struggle for existence is an internal part of this world. The little person is hurting, and he is very afraid, but here, in addition to everything else, he is torn away from his mother and put into a hard box. Exhausted, he strives to hide from this world in his dreams. This is what happens upon one's first encounter with the world. Fear, solitude, hopelessness, resentment, rage, and utter helplessness. These are the first lessons that are firmly and relentlessly printed on the white sheet of one's mind. The start that pendulums need has been formed. It is not without reason that such shocking delivery practice is to this very day still widely propagated and is considered to be rather civilized. Rarely does it occur to anyone that this kind of delivery is an absolutely terrifying shock which leaves a deep wound for life in the subconscious of a human being. Not a single creature in the animal world experiences anything like that when coming into the world. Only at a very few and extremely expensive clinics can one be born humanely. The first cruel lessons of the pendulum world are well learned, and throughout the subsequent life they are strengthened even further. One day the little one lets go of his mother's hand and runs with joyous and gullible courage towards life. But the pendulum world shows that life is not in the least that harmless, and then bang, the little one falls down. And his mom is already worried, fearing that he could be hit by a car. I am telling you all of this to show how strongly rooted in man is the predisposition to being negative. Let me repeat that. I am only telling you all this to show how strongly rooted in man is the predisposition to being negative. While good intentions of positivism often end up with the man either flying up into the clouds and building castles in the skies, or gathering all the strength to storm the earthly fortresses. Then what should you do in order to observe coordination? To just walk along the smooth road without dashing into pits or climbing obstacles? Perhaps you'd need to drop importance and consciously move with the flow. Yes, That is exactly what you need to do. But it is a rather difficult task because it is impossible to completely free yourself from importance, and the anxious mind is what's stopping you from moving with the flow, as it attempts to establish control over the flow and sleeping awake at the same time. And yet there is a way out of this situation, and it is simple as everything ingenious. You need to take advantage of the mind's habit of keeping everything under control and offer him a new game. The idea of the game is the following. When anything bad happens, wake up, consciously evaluate the importance of what is going on, and change your attitude. Let me repeat that. When anything bad happens, wake up, consciously evaluate the importance of what is going on, and then change your attitude. You can see for yourself your mind will like this game. You've already examined the principles of the game, the amusing battle with the clay dummy. But that is not all. Now you are going to find out about the main principle of coordination. When guided by this principle, you will be able to achieve the same success in the positive as negativists achieve in their worst fears. And this is how that principle goes. If you intend to view a seemingly negative change in the scenario as a positive one, then that is exactly what will happen. Let me repeat that. If you intend to view a seemingly negative change in the scenario as a positive one, then that is exactly what will happen. It sounds, if not absurd, then not really convincing, right? What positive could there be in an obvious defeat, and what good could there be in misfortune? And nonetheless, this principle works like a charm. Again, I am not calling on you to believe. Just go ahead and test it for yourself. Well, and when it comes to mind, there is an explanation for him too. As you know, the entire world is built on the principle of dualism. Everything has an opposite side. There is light and there is darkness. There is black and there is white. Positive and negative. Dense and empty, and so on. When you are walking on a log and bend to one side, you lift your arm on the opposite side to compensate for the deviation. Every event on a life track also has two branches, one to the favorable and one to the unfavorable side. Each time when encountering an event, you are making a choice about how to view it. If you view the event as positive, you get onto a favorable branch of the life track. However, the tendency towards being negative makes man express his dissatisfaction and choose the unfavorable branch. From early morning, man gets irritated for the tiniest thing. Then he gets more annoyed, and so the entire day turns into a constant train of trouble. You know perfectly well that even when it comes to the smallest things, if you lose your balance even for a second, then immediately follows a dramatic development of a negative scenario. As soon as something starts bothering you, a new problem comes up. And that is how misfortune never comes alone. But the train of troubles doesn't follow the actual misfortune, but rather what you make of it. Let me repeat that. The train of troubles doesn't follow the actual misfortune, but what you make of it. The pattern is shaped by the choice you make at the junction. Some small thing annoyed you, and you are already radiating on the frequency of the unfavorable branch. Besides, a negative attitude creates a potential of tension that takes away some of your energy of intention. You already are acting inefficiently, and now you encounter an even greater misfortune. Can you imagine where you are headed in a lifetime of such a chain of negative branches? This is what causes displacement of generations. And now imagine a different scenario. You encounter an annoying situation. Wait a moment before shaping your negative attitude and responding with the primitive reaction of an oyster. Tell yourself, stop. After all, this is just a game with a clay dummy. Well, fine, little dummy, let's play. No matter what, get yourself in a positive mood and pretend that this event pleases you. After all, people didn't come up with the following sayings for nothing. A blessing in disguise, nothing so bad as not to be good for something, and what you lose on the swings you gain on the roundabouts. Try to find something positive in the bothersome situation. Even if you won't find anything, still, be glad. Make a stupid habit of rejoicing at failures. Let me repeat that. Make a stupid habit of rejoicing at failures. It is much more fun than getting irritated and whining for any reason. You shall see for yourself that in most cases your misfortune is actually acting in your favor. Even if that won't be the case, you can be sure of the following. Thanks to your positive attitude, you wound up on a favorable branch and avoided other trouble. Actually, trouble is always a norm violation. They are only unfavorable to you because troubles are a gross deviation from balance and require additional energy expenses. You are the one to spend this energy when creating obstacles for yourself and then overcoming them. Fortune, on the contrary, that is, when you are satisfied, is the norm, but you are usually dissatisfied when an event deviates from your planned scenario. As soon as the mind sees that the scenario he accepted has been violated, he immediately views this change to be negative. And that is why the mind reacts the way it does and strives to impose control on the situation. So now explain the rules of the new game to your mind. Tell him he will be still in control. It is just that his control consists of viewing any event as positive. Activate the watcher in the very beginning of the play. For example, in the beginning of the day. Usually you have a rough idea about how the daily events will develop. At the moment of the scenario actually changing in front of your eyes, you need to accept the changes, agree to them. After all, you perceive the event to be negative only because it doesn't fit your scenario. Act as if it was exactly what you needed. Thus, you get a sliding and dynamic control over the introduction of changes to the scenario. Let me repeat that. Thus, you get a sliding and dynamic control over the introduction of changes to the scenario. Do not be in a rush to complain and fight the situation just because changes were introduced into the script while the play was still going on. Having rejected control over the situation, you will get it. Control will not be aimed at fighting the flow of variations, but at going with the flow. Let me repeat that. Having rejected control over the situation, you will get it. Control will not be aimed at fighting the flow of variations, but at going with the flow. The secret of coordination consists of releasing the grip and at the same time taking the situation into your hands. When the mind is holding his grip, he is not allowing the situation to develop according to the flow of variations. By accepting any changes in the script as given, you are rejecting imposing your control. This means to reject control and at the same time to keep your attitude and consequently the situation under control. In the end, you just want to avoid problems and live so that everything turns out well for you. And it will be that way if you start applying the principle of coordination. It is even more effective than trying to influence events with your external intention. The thing is that one's mind, as has already been mentioned, is unable to perfectly calculate all the moves in advance. After all, you are not the only one living in this world. The layer of your world crosses a myriad of layers of other people, and they too are constantly trying to achieve things. But there is no need for the mind to calculate events in advance. Everything you need to do is to play the slide of your goal and to follow the principle of coordination. Then external intention will successfully get you to your goal. One should note that coordination is all about practice. If you got the idea of the principle of coordination, that it is still not enough, you need to always develop and perfect this ability. Your watcher must always be active. Do not miss the moment when you are being dragged into the negative game without noticing. Do not miss the moment when you are being dragged into a negative game without noticing. Coordination is the most efficient way of moving in the space of variations. You treat every event as positive, and thus you always get out onto a favorable branch. You come across the wave of fortune more and more often, but you are not with your head in the clouds because you are acting intentionally and consciously. Hence, you are balancing on the wave of fortune. Therein lies the essence of transurfing. Let me repeat that. Coordination is the most efficient way of moving in the space of variations. You treat every event as positive, and thus you always get out onto a favorable branch. You come across the wave of fortune more and more often, but you are not with your head in the clouds because you are acting intentionally and consciously. Hence, you are balancing on the wave of fortune. Therein lays the essence of transurfing. End segment.